Right bracket chapter 2. Capital wealth. A blessing or a cursing. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. Ek. 5:10. If you had been a male born in Assyrian 1500 years before Christ, you probably would have been raised as a soldier for the rest of your life. You never would have learned a trade or owned a business. If you had been born in Egypt in the height of its glory, you would probably have been raised in the rock quarries, the mines, or as a farm slave, and would have lived in a mud hut. The pharaoh would have accumulated any excess profits, for he had assumed the position of a god, and you never would own a piece of ground. If you had lived in Athens, you would have been a slave to a huge bureaucratic group who exploited the masses by robbing them of their wealth and liberties. Being born in the Roman Empire would have offered you little more. The emperors were corrupt dictators, extracting money from the citizens by numerous and unreasonable taxes. The wealth of the Romans financed a huge government and innumerable soldiers with all its barbarism and corruption. In the Dark Ages you would have been a serf under a feudal system, and all the wealth produced would be taken by feudal lords. If you were born in the Orient, anciently or presently, you likely would have no more prosperity than a few days of extra food. Right bracket America has been one of the few nations to ever offer the common citizen the privilege of owning land or property. But, alas, in less than 200 years, it too has become corrupted by a huge government, excessive taxation, and diminishing freedoms. The natural disposition of most men is to exploit the wealth of others, rather than to produce their own. Then after this wealth is obtained, they usually refuse to share it. The centralization of wealth into the pockets of a few has led to the downfall of countless empires and nations. When Egypt went down, 2% of her population owned 97% of the wealth. When Babylon collapsed, 2% owned all of its wealth. When Rome fell, 1,800 men owned all the known world. Today in America, 3% of its population owns nearly 3/4 of its wealth. In such unjust conditions, wealth is taken from the middle class, leaving only the poor and the rich. Eventually the rich can control the markets, the prices, and all the other elements of society. A doctor, a sly politician, the shrewd lawyer, or a man-simulating banker can quickly sweep away a man's lifetime of savings. With the stroke of a pen, a man can be reduced to poverty and bankruptcy. By the shrewd manipulation of unjust economics, a man can be reduced to welfare. It is the lust and love of wealth that turns men into robbers and thieves, plundering the lives and property of others. Right bracket What will not men do for gold? They will toil for it, lie for it, swear for it, steal for it, murder for it, live for it, and die for it. They will do more, and suffer more, 10 times over, for gold, than they will do, or suffer for eternal life and happiness. ****** Yet, what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Mill. *14:369. It is not riches that create problems, but rather lusting after them. The more greed and selfishness in men, the greater their crimes and inequality. Why should one man own a castle, but his neighbor have a shack? The problem, then, is not the amount of money that men have, but rather how they obtain it and what they do with it. God often gives men wealth as a test. Many men use it only to gain more wealth, while others squander it. But wealth can also be used for doing good. A good man will consider wealth an obligation as a missionary tool to be used for the cause of Christ and his fellowmen. He recognizes that all wealth belongs to God, that God created it, and therefore he has the right to dictate how it should be used. He made the earth and all connected with it, organized it, and brought it forth, and now he intends to see what the people will do with it, whether they are disposed to do anything more than to say, "This is mine, and that is thine." If you cling to the world, and say it is hard for you to do this or that, recollect that the love of the Father is not in you. Let me love the world as he loves it, to make it beautiful, and glorify the name of my Father in heaven. It right bracket does not matter whether I or anybody else owns it, if we only work to beautify it and make it glorious, it is all right. Brigham Young JD 2:308. When men are reduced to cheating, stealing or committing murder for riches, it is because they have lost or do not have any spiritual understanding. When men can understand the nature of eternal riches and the glories of heaven, then the lust for gold will have lost its glitter. There is a veil between man and eternal things. If that veil was taken away and we were able to see eternal things as they are before the Lord, no man would be tried with regard to gold, silver or this world's goods, and no man, on their account, would be unwilling to let the Lord control him. Wilford Woodruff, JD 17:71. The proper perspective of life is to place God first and all else secondary. In such a condition, God would be glad to give all the wealth of the earth to his children. What is our duty? It is our duty to improve upon every blessing the Lord gives us. If he gives us land, improve it. If he gives us the privilege of building houses, improve it. If he gives us wives and children, try and teach them the ways of the Lord, and exalt them above the dark, degraded, and sunken state of mankind. Brigham Young, JD 2:334. Right bracket. But when men prize their wealth more than the needs of their neighbor, there will be injustices in our society. While the old, the sick, and the poor are of less concern than the zeal for self-aggrandizement, we will live in sin. Man's attitude toward wealth will prove to be real success or his downfall. Since wealth and riches can be an important factor in his eternal salvation, they should be an essential study among the principles of the gospel.